Nos acompaña Antonella Stasia, Financial Auditor at the European Court of Auditors. Antonella, hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for attending us.
Buenas tardes, buenas tardes. Quiero saludarlos en español, pero por lo demás de la entrevista mejor en inglés.
Vale, no hay ningún problema, Antonella. So, the European Court of Auditors said that not all the reported climate-related spending under the EU budget was actually relevant to climate action. We'd like to know which variables are taken into account to determine which actions are valid and which are not.
Okay, yes, thanks for your question. Looking at the relevance of the expenditure to climate action was one of the key aspects of this report that we just published. What we did was to take the Commission methodology and use it to make our own assessment. Commission methodology has three coefficients that are associated to the different spending component of the EU budget, depending on their relevance to climate action. So if we have a measure or an action that has a significant expected impact on climate, it will get 100% coefficient, so it will count entirely. If we have a measure that has a moderate contribution to climate, then Commission and we assign a 40% coefficient. If there is an insignificant or no contribution to climate at all, then we give a 0% coefficient. So this is the methodology the Commission used, and this is the methodology we applied. How did we apply it? We looked into all the scientific evidence available that could help us assessing the thematic funds that the Commission uses and that the Commission adds to the climate budget. Also, we use our internal expertise that we have developed over the years to help us in this assessment. And the sum of all this work turned out into some coefficients being by us considered too generous. Those that were used by the Commission were considered by us too generous. And therefore, we proceeded to suggest a more conservative coefficient. And the result of this exercise is that in our views, in our likely overestimations, as you said, only 13% of the EU budget contributes to climate action. I would like to give you an example just to make this whole more concrete. For instance, we looked at projects in the transport and rail transport sector under the Connecting Europe facility, which is a fund that aims to improve the rail connections across Europe. So these projects were always counted as 100%, so significant contribution to climate. But while we acknowledge, as the scientific evidence showed, that rail transport is indeed among the most efficient form of transport in terms of greenhouse gas emission, at the same time, it's often associated with high emission during the construction period, and this emission can take up to several decades to be offset. So, and on top of that, those projects usually concern electrification, but not all electricity comes from renewable sources. Actually, most of it still comes from fossil fuels. Therefore, there are many different variables that hinder the contribution to climate from this sector. And this is why we consider that a 40% coefficient, which is still a moderate contribution, so these projects can help to reach the EU climate objectives, it's more appropriate than the 100% contribution that was initially accounted for by the Commission.
Antonella, what could be the consequences of not having met the spending target?
If you mean whether there are any legal consequences, that is not the case. This target was set at the political level. So there was a communication from the European Commission that was then endorsed by the European Parliament and by the Council that commit to this 20% expenditure dedicated to climate action in the 2014-2020 EU budget. Then therefore, we could expect some political consequences following our report. But then more concretely, we have found, for instance, a mistake in the way reported expenditure were counted for the European Social Fund. So this will be corrected in the next annual management and performance report the Commission publishes every year, where they give the latest figures to the public on what we spent on climate. And then, furthermore, we have made several recommendations in our report, which aims at making reporting more relevant and reliable in the future to make such improvements. So, for instance, we recommended the Commission to issue guidelines to ensure consistency in treating different projects, similar projects in different funds. Or we recommend the Commission to report on those expenditures that are harmful for the climate. Or even another recommendation we had to improve the reliability of climate reporting is to really take stock of the unused amounts, so the amounts that were not spent or that were decommitted from the fund, which were initially included in this 20%. And then another recommendation that's it's very important for us, and that we think it's gonna improve the reporting, is to make a better link between the EU objectives in terms of climate and energy. The key one being reducing greenhouse gas emissions in order to meet our commitments under the Paris Agreement. And we ask the Commission to make a better link between what is spent on climate and how much this expenditure contribute to those goals. So basically, we want to know if there is any mitigation action achieved through the EU budget.
Hey, Antonella Stasia, thank you so much for attending us. Muchísimas gracias por atendernos y por acercarnos esta información. Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes, muchas gracias.